Hey, Corpus Christi, this year the church has asked us to reflect a little more deeply on the Eucharist, particularly this summer, to have sort of this Eucharistic revival. And so what got me thinking is how sort of our architecture is informed by the Eucharist. You notice in our church, we sort of have two different places in which the Eucharist is celebrated. We have what I call the Blessed Sacrament Chapel and the main church. Now, churches are built around an altar. That's the most important thing that we have in this church. And because of that theology, many churches, like the ones over in Europe, they have separate chapels that house the Blessed Sacrament, because they also understand that Jesus is still present in the Eucharist even after the Mass. And so we house the Blessed Sacrament in a special chapel, a chapel dedicated to just the housing of Christ. And so we are fortunate to have one of those chapels here, and I would encourage you to come by and pray maybe sometime this summer. This Blessed Sacrament is reposed here 24/7. And so throughout the day, if you'd like, you could come, say, for 15 minutes or even up to an hour and pray with Jesus. So this summer, I encourage you to really give in to the Eucharist, to really reflect on it, and maybe come by here and pray with Christ in our chapel. God bless. Common question is sort of the screens that we put up, and you can't see the tabernacle. And I know a lot of people kind of like seeing the tabernacle because it allows you to give reverence to Jesus before you sit in your pew, which is not a bad thing. But I would also argue that it's also really good to kind of focus in completely on the altar, because sometimes it gets lost that the altar is the most important thing in that church. And so the way that this church is built, it really lends itself to really get that theology across, that this place is a place where Christ is reserved in this tabernacle, in this Blessed Sacrament Chapel. And that place is where Christ is sacrificed during the sacrifice of the Mass. So it really highlights that theology quite well when you come into the church, and really your main focus isn't drawn to necessarily a tabernacle, but to an altar. You really get a sense of what you've come here to do for Mass. Sometimes it can be difficult because our lives are very go, go, go. We fill our schedules. We're always entertained, always engaged with something. And then to come sort of into the quiet of a Blessed Sacrament Chapel and to sit with the Lord can be difficult. I would encourage those who are maybe new to that type of prayer to maybe not expect yourself to be able to do that for an hour. Maybe the expectation needs to be a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Kind of start small, and then you will work up. It's the analogy that's common is like a marathon runner, right? If you wanted to train for a marathon, you're not going to instantly run 26.2 miles, right? You're going to start with 1 mile, then maybe 5 miles, 10 miles, until you build to the 26. Well, it's the same thing with sort of any kind of prayer in silence, contemplative prayer. Maybe just allow yourself to start slow. And the Lord's going to help you. He's going to invite you into these quiet moments, and it'll go longer and longer and longer. And before you know it, you might be spending, several minutes to several hours in adoration or in prayer with the Lord. So I'd encourage you just to start slow, and then you will kind of build up.